Younger than springtime are you, softer than starlight.
As I was a kid growing up, my dad worked for the S.S. Kresge Company, the 5 and 10 cent stores. I don't know if you remember them. But, and he was a store manager. And if he was doing a good job, every 3 years he got transferred. So as I said, I went to 3 grade schools, 3 high schools. I hated it because I didn't know anybody and I lost my girlfriends and stuff. And so that's why we moved so often. And I always believed, and I told my own kids, because after I graduated and got through the Navy and so forth, I took jobs where I was transferred the same way my father did. And I said I'd never do that to my kids because it had been done to me. But I convinced myself, and I'm not sure I convinced my kids. I said the family is closer together because we moved into a new town. We don't know anybody. My parents don't have friends. We don't have friends. So we do things as a family. I was a movie buff when I was a kid. As I said, because we moved so often, I didn't have many friends. That's why my family was closer, I think, as I said. But I didn't have a lot of friends to hang around with or go to the movies or whatever it might be. When we lived in Akron, Akron had a huge hangar for Zeppelins, and the Graf Hindenburg or von Hindenburg, I forget exactly what it was the world's biggest Zeppelin airship, and it came and tied up there. And we went out one time when I was a little kid, it must have been like 5th or 6th grade, and saw this thing come in at night, and it all lit up with lights and so forth. And they came in and tied up and let the crew down and so forth on ladders and so forth. Later on, not the Hindenburg, but the Graf Spee, which was another German aircraft carrier, not aircraft carrier, but aircraft Zeppelin. It was tying up somewhere, I think in New Jersey, and it caught fire and burned. And guys jumped out, you know. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't like 50 stories high, but it was maybe 10 stories high, and these guys jumped out and so forth. You know, it was kind of scary. And we went up one time. We went up with this. They had small Zeppelins there at the base, and you could get a trip up, and it was really kind of exciting. When I was a senior in high school in St. Louis, Missouri, my dad got transferred again every 3 years. And so my folks said, this is January of 1947. And my folks said, would you like to stay and finish your senior year in St. Louis instead of moving to New Jersey with us, where I wouldn't know anybody and so forth? And I said, yeah, sure. So I moved in with a friend of mine and had a great time. But the day after graduation, we got in the car and we drove to New Jersey. I didn't know a soul. And I'd had a real great girlfriend in high school, but I didn't know any girls, I didn't know any guys, I didn't know any way to meet people, you know, and I was lonely as heck. So then I went to college at Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we lived in New Jersey. And so I met some guys up there from a Jersey club, guys who lived in Jersey and went to college. And I told them my sad story. I said, I don't know any girls, I don't know any guys, how can I meet somebody? When we go home for Easter, Thanksgiving, or Christmas, we'll introduce you to some people. So, good, that's great. So, that happened, but they were mostly blind dates, and blind dates, my experience was not too good. And so I met a number of them, but I wasn't too happy with them. And so one of my friends from college said, I'm going to a party next week, why don't you, I'll arrange a date for you, a blind date for you, and you come to the party, and maybe you'll meet some people. Good. Really control their market for drugs. So twice a year they'd raise prices whether they needed to or not. And I was always saying, I worked with the name of the company was Abbott Laboratories. And I said, look folks, we don't need to raise prices twice a year. That's terrible. Think of all the poor patients out there that have to pay these high prices. And forget it, you know, and they continued going. So I stayed there. I stayed in the pharmaceutical business then for quite a while. Well, let's see. I left Spaulding, the plastic company, and went to work for a drug company in New York City. I was there for about 3 years again. And then I got hired to be president of a company in California. in La Jolla. And the first time I'd ever been out here. And I spent a month here in the Navy, and I said, boy, this weather's great, I gotta come back here someday. So here I was in La Jolla. And then I got hired by, the company that hired me and brought me out here, the chairman of the board, who was the guy who hired me as president, and he said, now we spent some money in a proxy fight to take over this company, and we want that money back. And I said, well, I saw a letter that you wrote to the shareholders at the time of the proxy fight, in which they asked you if you were going to want to be repaid right away, and you said no. I said, now you're telling me that he said, I'm telling you, I want you to write him a check right now. I said, I'm not gonna. He fired me. I'd never been fired before. So I sued him, and I won. The guy was his last name was Kenneth Langone, and he acted always like he was mafia, which he was Italian. And so I said something about, he's always bragging about being the mafia in the court, and he didn't like that. And a few days later, he's on the stand, and they're asking him some questions, and he opens his coat up and says, see, no guns, I'm not mafia. Well, that won the case for us. Anyway. So I went, and I'm talking to one of the guys there, and he was in. I said, I'm really interested in meeting some girls. Can you help me? He said, yeah. He said, I know a girl. I said, no more blind dates. He said, well, this girl is special. He said, she's very smart and very pretty, and he said, I'm Jewish, she's Catholic, we're not going to get together, so she's yours. I said, okay. So he said, I'll bring her next week. So okay, I go to the party with it turns out a friend of hers, my wife, and so I said to this guy, which is the one you're talking about? He said, that's her over there. I said, wow, I'm going to marry that girl. And I did. And then I called her a week later or something and asked her for a date. She said no. And so later on she told me that she talked to her friend, said this guy called me and he was your date for the party and I don't want to go out with him if she said, well, he didn't call me, he's not going to you go out with him. So I went out with her, and 4 years later we got married. My wife. One of the questions we asked in one of the early things was, what's your greatest accomplishment in your life? And I've said many times, marrying my wife, because she put up with all these moves. She was an only child who lived in the same house her whole life till she married me. And she put up with all these moves that we had. We moved to, I think I told you, we moved 18 times. And I moved 30 times. That included some of the moves with my dad. But my wife really raised our kids, because I traveled a great deal all around the world, and she was a good wife of a guy in business. I became an executive later on, and she was very good at entertaining customers and entertaining my people who worked for me, and understanding that I had to go to England one week and Japan the next week and someplace else. So she was my greatest accomplishment. I met my gal who's my wife now. I said, have you ever been to the Statue? She said, no. She said, no. I said, you've lived here your whole life. You've never seen any of these interesting things? She said, they're always there. I can go anytime I want. I haven't had to go yet. So anyway. Yes, a couple. We had a young. I have a daughter and a son and a daughter. And the oldest son, when he was a little boy, got sick, and we didn't know what it was, and they said they thought it was leukemia. They took him to the hospital. It turned out it wasn't leukemia. I don't remember what it was, but what a great relief that was, you know. And then that oldest son, when he was in the Peace Corps in Africa. He graduated from college. He was in the Peace Corps. And he came back from the Peace Corps, and he had an auto accident. And I went to the hospital, police station, I think, to say if he was all right and everything. And we took him to the hospital, and they said, read the sign, you know, the big E at the top, and you know how you read the letters. And he said, I can't see it. And we found out a week or so later he was blind. He was 20 years old. And I've always said that was the saddest day of my life when the doctor turned to me and said, your son is blind, you know. And my wife and I were just crushed, and so was my son, but he's completely overcome it. he's blind still. He's a college professor, he's tenured, he's head of his department, and I don't know how he teaches class and takes attendance and all that stuff, but he does it all. If he met you and he saw you 2 weeks later, he'd remember your name, and he can't see your face, but he'd remember your voice or something. I don't know how he does it. And then I have a grandson also. It turns out my wife's family has a defective gene that nobody knew about until we came along. And my grandson, my oldest grandson, is also blind and has the same disease. It's called Leber's disease. And he's not a college professor, but he works for Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in Boston, yeah. And he's in charge of all the computers at MIT. I mean, what a great job. and he's blind. But he has the same characteristics that my son does. When we first found out that the grandson was blind, my son, the blind one, called and said, "Why don't you have him come and spend a week with me and I'll show him how I get along?" Because he just found out he was blind, which was, I thought, a great thing for him to do. I think probably I did then. I since have changed my mind. I think the Korean War and the Vietnam War and the Middle East War, I think is a mistake for our country, because we're trying to make other countries democracies, and that's not their ethos. That's not how they live. So I think that's a mistake. But at the time, I thought it was the right thing to do. I was on a midshipman cruise, which meant we spent a month at sea between junior and senior year. And one day out in the middle of the Atlantic, they said, North Korea's invaded South Korea, and everybody in the ship said, "Where's Korea?" Nobody had ever heard of it. And the next day, the rumor went around the ship, "We're not going home, we're going to Korea." As it turned out, we didn't, but eventually I came out here, as I said. And I spent a month out here, and I said, "This San Diego weather is so great, I got to come back here someday." And here I am. I had a brother who was in the Marines, and another brother was in the Army, but my dad was too young for World War II. Too old for World War II, too young for World War II. I was in the Navy. I was in the best service. I could just remember I came home from college. I was in the ROTC at the time, and my brother Dan, who was 4 years younger than I was, said, "I've just joined the Marine Corps Weekend Warriors." And I said, "You're stupid. You're going to end up in Korea or someplace." And anyway, that's how I felt about it. My kid brother, my youngest brother, was 7 years younger than I was, and he was drafted, probably during the Vietnam War, but he was a college guy, so he got an office job. He didn't have to serve in the front lines. I learned a lot about discipline. I learned a lot about naval history. I learned about handling people. I mean, I was a guy right out of college, and I never really bossed anybody around, but suddenly I'm in charge of about 50 sailors, and I have to inspire them and make sure they're behaving themselves and all that sort of thing. So I learned a great deal about leadership from that job. In the Navy?
Yeah.
We served on what they called 3-section watches, which meant you'd stand watch for 4 hours, and you'd do it 3 times a day. So you'd get up once you got up at midnight to serve till 4. Another day you got up at 4 and served till 8, so on and so forth, which was tough. But we were busy. When I came aboard my ship, I was the assistant engineering officer, which I hated because I didn't like engineering, and I thought the course was boring and so forth. And it was hot down in the engine room. Boy, was it hot. Anyway, that was my main duty. Then they assigned you extra duties. One was I was ship secretary, which meant I had to run the ship's office, which meant a lot of paperwork stuff that I didn't like to do. And then I became a navigator. I became a officer of the watch, which meant I could control a ship during my tour of duty. We went from San Diego to San Francisco to Goat Island to Mare Island, and then back to San Diego again, and then finally on around through the Panama Canal and up to Philadelphia, where we went into a dry dock because they had to put new equipment on the ship. There had been the time from 1944 until this was 1951 and some of the equipment was outdated, so they had to take some of the old radar and sonar and guns off and put new ones on and so forth. So that's basically what we did. I really hadn't given a lot of thought because I knew from freshman year that I was going to be commissioned in the Navy, and I'd have to serve at least 2 years of active duty in the Navy. But I didn't think that was my career, because as a kid, my dad moved every 3 years with his job, and which meant I went to 3 grade schools, 3 high schools. I didn't know any kids in high school or grade school. I hated that. I said, I'm not going to do that, because the Navy life is every 2 years you're transferred somewhere, and West Coast, East Coast, who knows? And so I said, I know I don't want to do that. But when I got out of school and got out of the Navy, then I got a job as a sales engineer with a plastics company, and I chose, of the half a dozen companies I interviewed with, I chose one company that said, we never move anybody, because I didn't want to do that again. So I said, good, that's the job I want. And I got it there, and then I set the record for the company, and I transferred every 3 years for the rest of my life, which was terrible. And my kids hated it too. And I always said, I'll never do this to my kids, you know. And I used to tell the kids to justify our moves. I said, the family is closer together. When we moved to New York City, for example, you got to see the Empire State Building and Madison Square Garden and all that kind of stuff. And they said, yeah, Dad, how about keeping us in a school a little bit longer, you know? Anyway, that was tough. But it helped me get used to living with people and strangers and meeting new people and so on. So I think it probably was good from that standpoint.
Okay.
Well, I think, you know, pick the right partner and enjoy life. That's it. I think that's important. I've been very successful in business. I was president of 10 different companies or divisions or whatever, mainly because I was willing to move all the time. But so I've been successful as the world sees success, and I also have a great family, as I said, my wife. I'd like to say we have the most educated family in the world, because my 2 sons have Ph.D.s, my 2 daughters have masters, I have a Ph.D., my wife has a Ph.D., and I don't know anybody else who's got all those. When I go to the hospital, I always tell them I'm Dr. Drees, so they give me better care. Well, I've had a very fulfilling life. I'd like to live to be 100. I'm 85 and a half, but I think that'd be fun. Well, because we move so often, I don't have friends of many, many years, except my college roommate, who turned out to be, I went to a Jesuit prep school and a Jesuit college with all men, which was terrible. There was no girls around. But my roommate in college was a guy whose name was John Ryan, and he became a priest, and he since has retired, and he's a Monsignor, so he's a retired Monsignor, so he's my best friend. I think to work hard in school, get good grades, to try to find the right girl, and then I did, whom I married. And one of the things we talked about before was the greatest accomplishment, and I've always said my greatest accomplishment was marrying my wife, because she's made my whole life and my 4 kids and so forth great. I had a teacher in high school. I went to a Jesuit prep school, and I'd been in a parochial high school before that, and I was studying Latin. I came to this new school. My family moved. My dad moved every 3 years, and so I may have mentioned I went to 3 grade schools and 3 high schools, which was terrible because I didn't know anybody. But anyway, I went to this new high school and went to class. And the professor said, you're behind the rest of the class. And what am I going to do? He said, I'll take you every night for an hour, and I'll catch you up. And I said, well, what's it going to cost? He said, nothing, I'll just do it. And so he did that, and I caught up, and I eventually got very good grades and so forth. And I've always been grateful to that guy, because he didn't ask for anything. He just said, you know, I'll do it to help you. Probably my dad when I was a kid growing up, telling me that I should really concentrate on school and getting good grades and that sort of thing. But another thing that my dad also told me, I complained to him. I went out for the football team and the basketball team like all the other kids did. And I made the team, but I never played because I was so small. I weighed 135 pounds in high school, and same height I am now, I guess. But my dad said, and I complained to my dad about it. I said, gee, I never get to play in any of the games. And he said, well, go out for a sport where you're matched with people your own size, because the other guys on the basketball team are all 6'4", and I was 5'7". And so I said, okay, I'll do it. And I did do that, and he was right. I competed against only boxers my size. And so that worked out very well for me, and very good advice from my dad. Yeah, but my mom was a high school graduate. She didn't go to college, but she was a very smart lady, read a lot, and knew a lot about what was going on in life. Well, the boxing team thing that I mentioned had something to do. It was a change in my life because, as I said, when I was a kid in high school, everybody went out for the football team. Everybody went out for the basketball team. And my high school were the state champions of Missouri in basketball, and in football they were the city champions of St. Louis. It was a big city, and so to make the team or not make the team, or to make the team and never play was an important ththing in my life. I don't remember a specific slogan or anything like that, but my dad was very encouraging guy. As I said, we moved every 3 years, and so our family relationship, I think, was tighter than most would be, because we moved to a new town and my folks didn't have new friends yet and we didn't have new friends yet, and so we did things as a family. And for example, we moved from St. Louis to New Jersey, to Maplewood, New Jersey, and Maplewood's right across the river from New York City. So we went into New York, we saw the Statue of Liberty, we saw Madison Square Garden, and all these important things in New York. When I met my gal, who's my wife now, I said, have you ever been to the Statue? She said, no. She said, no. I said, you've lived here your whole life. You've never seen any of these interesting things? She said, they're always there. I can go anytime I want. I haven't had to go yet. So anyway, it was Mr. Mihawk. He was a Jesuit priest, and I remember him because I've always thought back of what a great thing he did for me without asking anything in return. I also had a nun, because I went to parochial schools, who, when I was in the 3rd grade or something like that, I got sick, and she took me into the convent and got me something to eat, and I thought, boy, this is special. I've been in a convent, Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When I was a kid living in Akron, Ohio, I've moved 30 times in my life, so that was another place that we lived. And my folks said, we're going up to Cleveland, which is 30 miles away, and we're going to see Aunt Kate. And Aunt Kate, great Aunt Kate, my dad's aunt, my great aunt. And Aunt Kate, great Aunt Kate, has had her feet cut off because she has diabetes, and she's had her legs amputated, her feet. And my mother said, I don't want you to say anything or look or anything. Well, I'm 5 years old, yeah. So we get there, and Aunt Kate's sitting in the backyard in a wheelchair with a robe over her knees. I walk up, pick the robe up, and take a look. My mother goes bananas. My dad says, the kid's 5 years old. What do you think? Aunt Kate says, go right ahead, have a look, But I think that's a funny story. My wife doesn't think I'm very funny. But I do, so I think I do, obviously. I've been a salesman most of my life, and so part of being a good salesman was telling jokes, So I've developed a group of jokes that I used to tell all the time. Well, they're not jokes so much as funny events, like the thing with Aunt Kate. Well, I like needling people, and maybe that's putting them down in some cases, but it's not intended as something nasty. I'm trying to make them laugh, That doesn't always work. Oh, I'm sure. But that reminds me of another funny event, I think. I was in grade school, and I was in a play. And the name of the play was something about Toby. I don't remember the name. And I was Toby. And when I was rehearsing the play, I made an entrance in the first scene or something. And I took my hat off and I threw it at a hat rack. And I'd done it, I'd rehearsed maybe 30 times and it never hit the hat rack. The day of the play, the opening, I come out on stage, I take my hat off, I throw it at the hat rack, it lands right on the hat rack. Everybody in the audience stood up and applauded. So I walked up to the front of the stage and took a deep bow, and the nun who was running this play, she kicked me out of the play because she said I shouldn't have done that. I thought that was funny. Study hard, get good grades, obey the law. You know, corny sounding stuff, I guess, but it's something that I believe in. One of the things you asked is, what do you want to become? I sang with a band when I was in high school, and I got into this band because the guys I met at school said, if you sing in the band, you'll meet a lot of girls. I said, hey, that's for me. So I joined this band, but it turned out I was up in the bandstand all the time, and I didn't get to meet all the girls who were out there dancing with the guys. But anyway, so one day, one of the guys on the band came to me and he says, you're just standing there and not doing anything between the songs, and so why don't you do something? I said, I can't play an instrument. And I said, well, we'll take care. We've arranged, we bought a bass viol, one of these great big violin things. And we bought that for you, and you can stand there. And I said, I can't play it. He said, oh, you just strum it. I said, oh, okay. So I stood up there, I was strumming away and having a good time. And then one of the guys went up to the microphone. He said, now the next song we're going to have is a solo by Drees. He's going to play the viol. And he handed me a bow, you know, the bow that you... I don't know what to do. They loved it. They thought it was great. Everybody in the room laughed. When we moved from St. Louis to New Jersey, I was a Frank Sinatra fan, and because he was a singer, obviously, and I hoped I could be as good as he was. But I decided to go into New York to see Frank Sinatra, who was having a concert at Carnegie Hall or someplace like that. Anyway, I went, and you had to take the train and the subway and stuff to get to New York. I get there, I get to the theater, the Paramount Theater on Broadway, and Times Square, and I go in the theater, and there's 8,000 screaming teenage girls there, and me. I was the only guy in the whole place. That was funny. Well, ballads. I sang with a band, as I mentioned, and mostly ballads. And I think that was probably the most popular music. I was a great Frank Sinatra fan, and hoped that I sounded like him. And he sang mostly ballads. My favorite song is Younger Than Springtime. And I took my wife to see South Pacific, which was a big hit in those days. And that was a song in that thing, and so that inspired me to go out with her. Younger than springtime, are you? And that's what we were younger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I did a lot, yeah. I can remember my mother complaining about it. It sounds like noise to me now. I mean, ballads were love songs generally, and soft and you know, not noisy, and the rap music and stuff that I hear today, I just don't think is music. I was a choir boy in the 4th grade, and in fact, and I may have told Morgan this story, but I was up in the choir loft one Mass. We were Catholic, and I was fooling around with a kid next to me, and the pastor turned around. He was up saying Mass, and he turned around and he said, Thomas Drees, get out of the choir loft. My mother was embarrassed to tears. Boy, did I catch heck. But I was wrong. I should have been pulling this guy's cassock, whatever I did. So my introduction to music was in the choir.
Yeah.
Be Younger Than Springtime.
Yeah.
For me, it was an outlet. My dad was transferred every 3 years. And so I went to 3 grade schools and 3 high schools, and I was always meeting new people. I had very few friends. I was a very lonely kid, and for me, the music was an outlet and a sort of a way to, I guess, get out of my loneliness that I had.
Well, I said,
Yeah.
mentioned to you before, you asked us to think of, I tell you, 10 songs we had. I sat down and looked at this list that I had, and I found 15, but Younger Than Springtime was number 1. Always was another one. That was a love song of my parents. Someone to Watch Over Me. I don't know if you've ever heard that. You probably never heard of any of these. Some Enchanted Evening, which is also from South Pacific. Maria, which was in a musical called, most of these are in musicals, called West Side Story, and it was about a Puerto Rican girl falling in love with a... Wow, gee, you're older than I thought. New York, New York was another famous Frank Sinatra hit. Over the Rainbow, Judy Garland, great movie and play and so forth. Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from Oklahoma. All or Nothing at All, Frank Sinatra hit again. Day by Day, Doris Day was a gal singer. I was a DJ when I was in college, and Doris Day in Massachusetts, and Doris Day came to be on my DJ show. It was a big moment for my life. Old Black Magic, also by Doris Day. The Trolley Song, Judy Garland again, from a movie called Meet Me in St. Louis. Stormy Weather, I don't remember who read it. As I remember, it was an African-American song, but it was a good song. Nancy with a Laughing Face, I have a sister named Nancy. As Time Goes By, I'll Never Smile Again, I've Got a Crush on You. So these are all love songs and ballads and that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, I think because I was in the choir, and then with, I think I mentioned also, I was singing with a band, and I said, you know, see, I stand up there and I sing, and so I never get to meet any of the girls. They said, well, we'll introduce you, we'll take care of it. So I said, oh, that's good. So the next time we were ready to just go out and sing, and they said, we bought a bass viol for you, a big bass viol, you know. And I said, what do I do with that? They said, well, I can't play it. They said, well, just strum it, and it'll, you know, that'll be fine. So I'm up there and I'm strumming away, and at the end of the number, the guy who was our band leader got on the microphone and he said, we have a special treat tonight, and he handed me a bow to play the violin with. I couldn't play it. I didn't know what to do with it. So they just embarrassed the hell out of me and loved it, and everybody in the room laughed. And, you know, I never ever did learn how to play that thing. I took a trombone lessons for a while, but I was so small that I couldn't reach the end of the whatever they call that slide, and so I had to give that up. Another story: my mother, when I was in about the 4th or 5th grade, she wanted me to learn to play the piano, which she did. She was a very good piano player, so she got me piano lessons, and I went regularly once a week or something to take the lesson. And then she said, I want you to take the lessons all summer too. So I used to go out of the house with my music under my arm, but I wouldn't go to the lesson. I'd go out and play with my friends. At the end of the year, summer, my mother said, I'm going to talk to Mrs. Smith, or whatever her name is, the piano teacher, and see how you're doing, and I'll sign you up for next year. Ooh, I was in trouble. So she called the teacher, and the teacher said, I haven't seen him all summer. Once more, like the choir, I was in trouble again. I spent a good part of my youth in trouble. Younger than springtime, are you?
Softer than starlight